Before time existed, there was only the gaze, a silent field, aware of itself, observing its own potential. From this primordial act of attention was born the vibration that gave shape to matter, the rhythm that turned emptiness into dance. Today, every human thought repeats this ancestral gesture. By observing, we create. By feeling, we shape. And by becoming silent, we return to the source where the universe breathes. This is the mystery that permeates everything, the power of observation that weaves realities and reveals that the observer and the observed are one single consciousness experiencing itself in the form of stars, atoms, and soul. Everything that exists before being perceived rests in a state of potential. The quantum universe is not a fixed stage, but a vastness of possibilities awaiting a gaze to awaken them. It is at this point that consciousness becomes the true stage, not the space where things happen, but the substance that allows them to happen. Every atom vibrates within an ocean of invisible attention, and it is this silent presence that defines the frequency of creation. Consciousness is not something we possess. It is what we are before any form of identity. It is the background that sustains the movement of thoughts, emotions, and perceptions. When you observe a sunset, what truly happens is not the meeting between eye and light, but between being and the very possibility of perceiving. In that instant, the universe recognizes itself in you, and you recognize yourself in it. Modern physics began to sense this mystery when it discovered that the act of observation alters the behavior of particles. Quantum reality does not reveal itself until it is called forth by consciousness. It is as if the cosmos awaited an invitation to unveil itself, a kind of secret agreement between the gaze and the invisible. This phenomenon is not only scientific, but deeply spiritual. It suggests that the world is not something that happens to us. It is something that happens through us. Imagine existence as an immense dome of mirrors. Every conscious being reflects a part of the whole, and the sum of all reflections builds the spectacle of reality. When a single mirror goes dark, a portion of the universe ceases to be recognized. That is why every consciousness is indispensable. Without your gaze, certain notes of the cosmic symphony would never be played. Many seek the meaning of life as if it were hidden somewhere far away, but meaning is generated the moment consciousness turns towards something with full presence. When you contemplate a tree and, for a moment, there is no judgment or thought, only the pure act of perceiving, you are co-creating the universe in its simplest form. The tree is not just an object before you, it is an expression of the same consciousness that observes you back, silently. The duality between observer and observed is only an appearance. Just as the flame and its light cannot be separated, the being who observes and the phenomenon observed are manifestations of the same vibrating field. Consciousness is not inside the brain, nor confined to the human mind. It permeates the subtlest structures of existence, manifesting as intelligence in DNA, as harmony in planetary orbits, as intuition in the heart. When we understand that consciousness is the stage, everything changes. The world ceases to be a collection of random events and becomes a sequence of reflections of one's own inner state. If the mind is chaotic, the universe feels uncertain. If the heart is coherent, the universe responds with synchronicity. Coincidences that once seemed random become subtle responses to the vibration of the observer. A simple exercise can make this tangible. Close your eyes for a moment and feel the space between one thought and another. That silent interval is the same space where the universe is born. It is the field of pure consciousness, formless yet full of potential. Remain there for as long as you can. Notice how from that stillness, every sensation, every sound, every image arises and dissolves effortlessly. In that recognition, the world reveals itself as a continuous flow of consciousness perceiving itself. From this point arises a sacred responsibility. To understand that everything one experiences is, in some way, an extension of one's own state of being. There is no victim, no chance. There is a field responding to the quality of attention. Therefore, cultivating clarity and presence is more than a mental exercise. It is an act of conscious creation. Throughout millennia, masters of different traditions have tried to express this truth. Some called it the universal mind. others spirit, quantum vacuum, God, or the unified field. The words vary, but the essence remains. There is one single conscious reality manifesting in infinite forms, and each time a being awakens to this perception, the entire universe expands a little more. When you understand that consciousness is the stage, you stop seeking meaning outside and begin to live as its expression. Fear dissolves because nothing can exist outside this field. Loneliness becomes an illusion, for every being is a face of the same mirror. Creation ceases to be effort and becomes dance. In the silence between one breath and another, the cosmos awaits your gaze. At every instant, consciousness asks, "What will I choose to see now?" And in answering, you light the stage where the universe happens, not out there, but within yourself. When a seed breaks through the earth, something invisible has already guided it before its roots found the soil. This silent impulse is intention, a force that does not impose but directs. The same principle operates in all creation. Every form, every event, every synchronicity is the result of observation infused with purpose. Nothing moves by chance. Everything responds to the direction of the conscious gaze that sustains it. To observe is not simply to see. It is to touch the subtle field where energy awaits a direction to manifest. The universe reacts to the quality of that attention as a lake responds to the touch of a stone. Waves spread, reorganizing the reflection on the surface. Where the gaze rests with clarity, chaos turns into structure. Where the mind wavers between doubt and desire, the field remains murky. Quantum physics revealed that particles do not exist in a defined state until they are observed. But what scientific instruments record as probabilistic behavior is, in truth, the echo of something deeper. Consciousness in action. The act of observing is the meeting point between the invisible and the manifest, the moment when vibration meets form. And that form, shaped by intention, carries the energetic signature of the one who perceived it. Intention is more than a thought. It is a vibrational vector. It arises from the alignment between mind and heart, when focus becomes pure enough to generate order within the quantum field. A fragmented intention scatters energy, while a silent, clear, and steady intention makes the universe reorganize around it. It is the same principle that makes water take the shape of its mold. The mold is the focus, the water is the field. Try to recall a moment when you were deeply present, perhaps observing someone you love or immersed in creation. In those moments, time seems suspended. Perception intensifies, colors gain depth, sound becomes texture. This sensory amplification is a sign that the field is responding to your attention. The energy around you organizes itself because the observer has become an axis of coherence. True intention is not born from mental effort, but from silent emotional clarity. When desire is mixed with anxiety, the field vibrates in disorder. When desire dissolves into presence, energy begins to move with mathematical precision. The universe does not respond to the request, but to the state of the one who requests it. That is why the same thought can produce opposite results, depending on the vibration that sustains it. The ancient alchemists called this the magnetism of the spirit. They knew that every form emerges from a subtle center of gravity, that which the being sustains with constancy of perception. If the focus is fear, fear condenses into reality. If it is gratitude, harmony reveals itself in increasingly evident patterns. The universe does not distinguish emotions, it only translates vibrations. Every conscious observation is an act of energetic architecture. The surrounding space responds, rearranging flows, attracting situations, synchronizing events. It is not a miracle, it is resonance. Just as two tuned instruments vibrate together, reality seeks to mirror the inner tone of the observer. When intention is precise, noise ceases and life begins to dance in rhythm. One way to feel this principle is to choose something ordinary, a cup, a plant, a distant sound. Observe it in silence without interpreting. Keep your gaze steady yet soft, and notice the moment when the object ceases to be merely an object. A sense of silent communication arises, as if the field between you and it has become one. In that moment, energy reorganizes. What was simple perception becomes shared vibration. The power of intention also manifests in human relationships. A gesture of true listening changes the energy field of an entire conversation. The other feels seen, and something within them begins to harmonize. The same happens with places and circumstances. Where there is conscious attention, there is healing of noise. It is as if the universe awaited that kind of gaze to remember the order that sustains it. The rational mind tries to understand this process as causality, but the heart recognizes it as attunement. The coherence between the two creates an invisible axis that guides energy naturally. When the observer stabilizes within this axis, the universe does not need to be persuaded, it simply responds. Pure intention does not demand, it reveals. The quantum field is not outside, it is the very fabric of presence. Each thought is a ripple in that fabric, and each emotion, a frequency that directs it. When observation is made with awakened attention, energy begins to draw geometries around the focus. It is at that moment that life seems to conspire. Coincidences multiply, and the invisible becomes tangible. Everything observed with intention gains a more defined form. Matter, time, and circumstances align to sustain the vibrational pattern emitted. Therefore, power does not lie in wishing strongly, but in observing purely. The universe is sensitive to the quality of your gaze. A calm focus can turn chaos into symmetry, just as a single perfect note can restore harmony to an entire symphony. When the observer understands this, they stop reacting to the world and begin to dialogue with it. Every event becomes a response to the vibration emitted. Life ceases to be a stage to be controlled and becomes a living mirror, adjusting to the clarity of your consciousness. At that point, the invisible is no longer a mystery, it is cooperation. Energy moves toward order because intention, silent and lucid, has shown it the way. And thus the universe, sensitive to the slightest gesture of consciousness, begins to organize itself around the one who observes it with an awakened heart. An isolated thought is like a cold spark. It has form but lacks fire. It is emotion that ignites it, giving it enough vibrational density to cross the invisible space between desire and manifestation. In the quantum universe of consciousness, emotion is the magnetic field that transforms intention into creative force. It is the wind that blows over the calm surface of the lake of the mind, generating waves that spread throughout the cosmos. Conscious observation already has the power to influence reality, but without emotion, that power remains potential. Emotion is the movement of consciousness within itself, the vibration that gives body to attention. When we feel something deeply, joy, gratitude, love, the energy field intensifies and becomes coherent. This coherence creates a vortex of order capable of attracting circumstances compatible with its frequency. The ancients knew this intuitively. They called the heart the inner sun, the center from which all the waves that structure experience depart. The mind observes, but the heart propels. The mind sets the direction, emotion supplies the energy. When the two are misaligned, focus loses strength, like a compass trying to point north within a confused magnetic field. When they align, the universe responds with geometric precision. Emotion is a language prior to words. Before any thought is articulated, the body is already translating the vibrational state into subtle impulses. Lighter breathing, relaxed muscles, temperature that adjusts. These responses are signs that the inner field is in tune. What we feel is not merely a biological phenomenon, it is the direct reflection of how we are dialoguing with the universe. When a dense emotion is suppressed, its energy does not disappear, it merely turns into noise. The observer loses clarity and begins to emit contradictory vibrations. The desire for harmony mixes with the fear of loss, hope with doubt, and the field responds with disorder. The universe does not judge the content of emotions, it only amplifies the dominant pattern. Therefore, understanding one's own emotion is essential. What is not felt cannot be transformed. Feeling is the first act of liberation. When an emotion is welcomed without resistance, its raw energy converts into presence. This presence is pure fuel for the power of observation. It is not necessary to force joy or manufacture gratitude. It is enough to become intimate with what is felt and remain conscious while the feeling occurs. In this gesture, the energy that was once scattered reorganizes itself, and observation becomes radiant. Emotion is the means by which the universe experiences itself. When a human being is moved by beauty, pain, or mystery, the cosmos, through them, recognizes its own creation. It is as if each emotion were a cosmic idiom, a frequency through which consciousness listens to itself. That is why emotion is not an obstacle to spirituality. It is its most direct bridge. Science, in observing the human heart, discovers that it generates an electromagnetic field far more powerful than that of the brain. This field expands meters away, interacting with the environment and with other beings. When someone feels genuine love, compassion, or peace, the entire body enters coherence, and this harmony spreads like an ordering wave. The world around responds subtly. People grow calmer, decisions seem to flow lightly, time takes on another rhythm. But emotion only amplifies the power of observation when it is authentic. Feigning serenity or positivity is like trying to light a bonfire with ashes. The energy does not move because the intention is disguised. The quantum field recognizes vibrational truth, not appearance. When emotion is genuine, even if painful, it opens a direct channel between the observer and the universe. Pain felt with consciousness is more transformative than forced joy. Imagine observing a simple event, the sound of falling rain, for example. If you merely listen, it is a neutral event. But if you allow yourself to feel the freshness, the rhythm, the scent of wet earth, the whole body participates in the observation. A subtle emotion arises, perhaps melancholy or peace. In that instant, perception deepens and something invisible moves. The energy field reorganizes because emotion gave life to attention. The power of emotion lies in its ability to unite polarities. It is a bridge between the material and the subtle, between the visible and the invisible. Every genuine feeling is a form of silent prayer, a vibrational transmission that the universe recognizes without translation. When the observer allows feeling to accompany seeing, observation becomes whole. Reality ceases to be merely perceived, it becomes felt, and therefore transformed. Emotion and consciousness form a continuous circuit. Consciousness illuminates, emotion expands. One without the other is incomplete. Observation without emotion is cold, devoid of energy. Emotion without consciousness is chaotic, without direction. When they unite, they create the perfect field for manifestation. It is at this point that the observer becomes a co-creator. Every time a feeling is fully lived, it generates a unique vibrational signature. This signature is like a coordinate that the universe uses to respond. If the feeling is love, the answers arrive in the form of harmony. If it is fear, experiences shape themselves to mirror that fear. There is no punishment, only vibrational correspondence. The true practice is learning to feel with lucidity, not fleeing from emotion, but observing it until it becomes pure energy. In that state, the heart becomes a quantum transmitter, and the entire universe begins to vibrate in resonance with it. The observer then discovers that emotion is not something that binds them to matter, but the means by which they transcend it. When feeling and consciousness merge, the universe does not need to be persuaded to respond. It simply does because it recognizes in the observer the same vibration that pulses in its stars. And in that instant, emotion ceases to be human and becomes cosmic, the very rhythm of the infinite pulsing within the heart that observes. The universe is a living field of possibilities, fluid like the wind and sensitive to intention. It responds to consciousness with precision, but recoils when the mind tries to imprison it in fixed forms. The act of controlling is the gesture that divides. The instant the observer tries to force the outcome, reality fragments into poles, success and failure, right and wrong, gain and loss. Duality arises not as punishment, but as a reflection of the attempt to dominate the flow of creation. Pure observation is receptive, like the calm surface of a lake reflecting the sky. Control, by contrast, is an anxious wave that distorts the reflection, trying to force the mirror to show only what pleases. The paradox is that, in trying to fix the image, the observer breaks the link with the quantum field, which moves solely through freedom. Creative energy reorganizes itself according to openness, not rigidity. Control closes the circuit of manifestation. Trust keeps it alive. Duality is the cradle of human experience. Through it, the being recognizes itself, learning to distinguish light and shadow, movement and silence. However, when control becomes a habit, the being stops learning from duality and starts getting lost in it. The mind, accustomed to measuring and predicting, tries to reduce mystery to certainties, and mystery, which is alive, withdraws. The universe then seems to resist, when in truth it merely reflects the contraction of the observer. The impulse to control is born from the fear of not belonging to the flow. When there is distrust, the observer believes they must intervene to ensure the world serves them. But the quantum field does not respond to force, but to resonance. It aligns with those who vibrate in harmony, not with those who impose direction. It is like trying to command the tide with your hands. The more you struggle, the more the natural movement unravels. Science describes wave collapse as the instant when potential becomes reality. This collapse does not occur through imposition, but through presence. Conscious observation is enough to define a form. Control, on the other hand, introduces noise into the system. The same happens within human consciousness. The fear of losing control creates interference, and the result, once fluid, becomes unstable. Imagine the act of observing a flame. If the gaze is relaxed, it dances freely, revealing its contours, its nuances, the rhythm of the sparks. But if the observer tries to fix it, perceiving every detail with tension, the vision becomes blurry. Rigid focus tires the eyes, and the movement of light seems to fade. So it is with life. The more you try to dominate what should be spontaneous, the farther you move from the essence. Control is an attempt to anticipate the outcome. Consciousness that wants to foresee the future abandons the present, and the present is the only point of contact with the creative field. Everything observed outside the now disconnects from the source. That is why the ancient masters spoke of non-action, not as inertia, but as deep trust in the rhythm of existence. To act without control is to allow life to act through you. Duality is not an enemy, it is a mirror. It shows where the observer has split from themselves. When there is an attempt to control, the being creates one side that desires and another that fears. Between them, conflict is born, and from this friction arises the illusion of separation. Unity never disappears. It is only covered by the tension between wanting and resisting. When control ceases, the field rebalances, and polarity dissolves naturally. The universe is not a machine that needs to be commanded, but an intelligence that communicates through correspondence. Every time the observer tries to dictate the outcome, they move away from listening. Creation does not require effort, but attunement. And this attunement is only possible when the observer recognizes that they are not separate from the phenomenon they observe. The same field that moves them is the field that creates the movement. To control is a gesture of forgetting. It is to forget that consciousness is not the author, but the space where the story happens. When this remembrance returns, control dissolves and gives way to natural direction. Action arises without tension, guided by an intelligence that does not depend on thought. The being acts, but does not identify as the agent. They observe, participate, and allow the universe to express itself through their attention. There is a point at which surrender becomes power. When the observer releases the outcome, energy flows again. Intention remains, but without the rigidity of expectation. Creation reorganizes because, free from interference, the field finds the most harmonious way to manifest. Duality, once necessary, becomes complementarity, light and shadow, action and rest, alternating in balance. Control is an echo of the illusion of separation. It is the mind trying to assert itself before a universe that in truth is already in its favor. When this perception matures, the observer understands that the flow is not an enemy to be tamed, but an intelligence to be listened to. Trust is not passivity, it is alignment. The universe moves toward harmony when the observer stops fighting the movement. Releasing control is allowing mystery to return to its course. It is recognizing that consciousness does not need to decide the path, only to keep its focus and allow the field to draw it. The result is not loss, but liberation. Duality fades, and the observer discovers that there were never two sides, only the same energy learning to know itself through contrast. When control turns into trust, observation becomes pure again. The universe, at last, returns to reflecting what it has always been, an indivisible totality, moving gently on the stage of awakened consciousness. Between one thought and another, there is an interval that almost no one notices, a space without form, without time, where the mind dissolves and the being simply is. This interval, this inner silence, is the point of contact between the observer and the quantum field. It is there that the universe ceases to be a theory and becomes a living presence. Everything that is created is born from that instant in which nothing is said, but everything is understood. Silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of attention. It is the foundation upon which all perception rests. Just as invisible space sustains the stars, silence sustains thought. When the observer dives into this stillness, the noise of the mind calms and consciousness begins to vibrate at a finer frequency. In this state, energy organizes itself, without effort, without command. The entire universe seems to breathe with you. Modern science approaches this understanding by studying what it calls neural coherence. When mental activity decreases and the nervous system enters harmony, the body emits stable vibrational patterns. This alignment creates a direct bridge to the field of information that permeates all existence. What spiritual traditions called meditation or contemplation is, in essence, this return to the natural tuning between mind, body, and cosmos. Silence is an active force, not passivity. It reorganizes the observer's interior, dissolving excess thought and layers of emotional noise. Within it, intentions gain purity, and energy begins to flow without resistance. The mind, accustomed to interpreting and labeling, learns to listen, and the universe, sensitive to this listening, reveals itself more clearly. Everything that seemed distant draws near, not by conquest, but by resonance. In deep stillness, consciousness expands beyond identity. The I that observes ceases to be an isolated point and recognizes itself as the field itself. In this recognition, time loses rigidity, space becomes malleable, and life begins to move in step with a greater order. It is the state in which the observer becomes a perfect mirror, without distortions, without effort, reflecting the universe as it is. Inner silence is the laboratory of the real. It is there that perceptions are distilled until they become pure knowing. What was disordered emotion becomes clarity. What was doubt reveals itself as energy seeking direction. The observer discovers that they do not need to fight thought, but simply return to the space between thoughts. In this return, everything simplifies. The field responds to the vibration of peace as a crystal responds to light. The power of this state is immeasurable because in it, the observer ceases to be author and returns to being a channel. When the mind grows quiet, universal consciousness flows through it without obstruction. Ideas arise whole, answers present themselves without reasoning, and everyday life reorganizes in an almost miraculous way. Silence allows the invisible to speak in the language of intuition. But reaching this point does not mean fleeing the world. Silence is not exile, it is center. It does not ask for isolation, but for presence. It can exist amid noise, in traffic, in a conversation, in the instant between one gesture and another. What activates it is not the absence of sound, but the suspension of reactivity. When the observer stops reacting automatically, silence settles in and the field aligns. That is where the real power of observation begins to manifest. Inner noise is the friction between what is and what one wants to control. When control ceases, the sound of the universe becomes audible, a continuous vibration like the echo of being itself. Silence then ceases to be a technique and becomes a way of being. It is the state of one who remembers that the universe does not speak in words but in frequencies. There are moments when inner silence is so deep that the sense of separation disappears. The body becomes light, thought thins out, and perception expands until it touches something vast and familiar. In that instant, the observer understands that the quantum field is not outside. It is the very fabric of the consciousness that observes it. Everything that exists vibrates within this same silent matrix. The paradox is that the more one tries to reach silence, the farther it gets. It is not achieved, it is recognized. It is the natural state that remains when the inner noise fades. Therefore, the practice is not to create silence, but to remove what covers it. Excessive thinking, haste, judgment, fear. When these layers fall away, silence arises on its own, not as emptiness, but as fullness. In this state, observation gains a new power. Each gaze becomes a prayer, each breath an act of creation. The observer does not think about the universe, they feel it pulsing within, and the universe, recognizing this tuning, responds with loving precision. Life begins to happen from the inside out. Chance gives way to synchronicity, and effort to fluidity. Close your eyes for a moment and listen to the sound that exists behind all sounds. It is an almost imperceptible hum, a background of constant vibration. This is the pulse of the field. By recognizing it, something in you also grows quiet. It is at this point that the world ceases to be something observed and becomes something listened to. Silence is the true portal. There is no other way to cross the veil between the visible and the invisible. All creation is born from it and returns to it. Allowing yourself to grow quiet is to make space for the universe to speak. Wisdom is not in the words, but in the pause between them, the sacred interval where the infinite breathes. And if this silence touched something in you, let it reverberate beyond the screen. Take a deep breath, close your eyes for a few seconds, and feel the inner space expand. Then share this experience in the comments. Write, "I heard the silence." May this phrase become a collective reminder that the portal is always open, just a pause away. And if this content led you to that moment of stillness, like this video, not as an automatic gesture, but as a vibrational seal of presence. Somewhere between thought and feeling, there is a frequency capable of altering the very fabric of reality. That frequency is coherence, the state in which the mind and the heart vibrate in the same rhythm, without conflict, without dissonance. When this happens, the quantum field responds with perfect synchronicity. Situations fit together, time adjusts, and the universe seems to organize itself around an invisible harmony. Coherence is the sound of consciousness in balance. The mind thinks, the heart feels, but they rarely walk together. The mind wants to understand, control, predict. The heart wants to trust, surrender, flow. When one pulls to one side and the other to the opposite, energy fragments. Intentions become confused, actions lose strength, and the field becomes disorganized. Coherence arises when both listen to each other, when the mind stops doubting the heart and the heart learns to guide the mind. It is at this meeting point that the being becomes whole. Neuroscience already detects the physical power of this alignment. When the heart enters a state of coherence, that harmonious, steady rhythm we feel in moments of peace, the brain's electrical pattern changes. Brain waves become more regular, nerve impulses balance out, and the entire body begins to function like a single symphony. This state produces mental clarity, emotional stability, and above all, a vibration that resonates with the quantum field in an orderly way. The heart is more than a biological pump. It is a center of perception. It has its own neurons, memory, and a vibrational language that the universe understands. It is the first organ to beat when life begins, and the last to grow quiet when it ends. Its beat is the sound signature of embodied consciousness. When this rhythm harmonizes with thought, something within the being awakens, a lucidity that is not rational but essential. Imagine for a moment that the mind is the navigator and the heart is the compass. The mind charts the map, but the heart points to true north. Without coherence, the navigator gets lost in the sea of possibilities, confusing desire with direction. When both align, the ship of consciousness moves in a straight line, guided by an invisible wind of purpose. That wind is the energy of the field responding to inner alignment. Coherence cannot be forced, it is cultivated. It begins with a simple gesture, breathing consciously. Breath is the thread that connects thinking to feeling. As you inhale with attention, the mind slows down and the heart finds its rhythm. In a few moments, the entire body comes into resonance. In this state, any intention gains multiplied strength. It is the moment when human consciousness touches the pulse of the cosmos. When the observer lives in coherence, their actions cease to be automatic reactions and become extensions of inner silence. They speak only what is necessary, act with precision, and perceive before judging. This harmony between mind and heart creates a stable magnetic field that the universe recognizes as a sign of energetic maturity. Everything begins to flow organically, without effort. Decisions seem right, coincidences multiply, and time takes on another texture. But the path to coherence requires honesty. The heart cannot be deceived by fabricated intentions. It recognizes the truth even when the mind tries to disguise it. When there is conflict between what one thinks and what one feels, the field reacts with distortions, delays, resistance, confusion. The universe does not punish, it merely mirrors the lack of alignment. Therefore, coherence is less a technique and more a way of existing in truth. The mind and the heart are like two instruments tuning before the concert. The mind offers structure, the heart offers rhythm. When both find the same tone, the sound that emerges is cosmic music, pure vibration that reverberates beyond the body, crossing space, reaching other beings, influencing realities. It is the sound of the universe recognizing itself through human consciousness. The daily practice of this harmony is simple but profound. Before making a decision, pause and feel. Notice what the heart answers before the mind formulates an argument. The first sensation is always the truest. When there is coherence, the whole body feels a slight relaxation, a quiet yes that needs no justifications. This is the sign that energy is aligned. By living in coherence, the observer becomes a field of stability within chaos. Their very presence begins to reorganize the environment. People calm down around them, conflicts soften, adverse circumstances balance out. Coherence is contagious because it vibrates at a frequency of order, and order in the universe is irresistible. The absence of coherence, on the other hand, creates noise. It is the state of someone who says one thing, feels another, and acts driven by fear. This dissonance consumes energy, exhausts the body, and confuses the field. Life becomes fragmented, like a melody played out of time. But a single moment of truth, a return to the breath, an instant of inner listening, is enough for harmony to begin to be restored. Coherence is proof that the power of observation lies not only in seeing the world, but in vibrating in tune with it. When mind and heart unite, observation ceases to be effort and becomes presence. It is as if the entire universe began to breathe in the same rhythm as your chest. In this state, the impossible becomes only a matter of time an extension of your consciousness. To be coherent is to live as the field lives, in dynamic balance, in constant harmony. It is to observe with a lucid mind and feel with an awakened heart. And when this happens, the universe does not need to be convinced to respond. It simply does, because it recognizes in you its own highest vibration. All creation is born from the meeting between intention and surrender. Intention gives the field form, detachment keeps it free. When the observer clings to the outcome, energy contracts and the flow of creation loses its naturalness. Attachment is the hand that tries to hold water. The more force, the less is kept. Detachment, meanwhile, is the open palm that allows the river to follow its course, knowing that movement is abundance itself. To detach is not to give up. It is to trust that the universe possesses an intelligence greater than any personal plan. It is to recognize that life does not go in the wrong direction. It only responds to the vibration we emit. When the observer frees themselves from the need to control the outcome, the quantum field reorganizes probabilities with greater precision because the interference of fear disappears. Energy flows again, and the result manifests in a purer way. Attachment is born from the fear of losing, and fear is the fog that distorts the gaze. The observer believes they must guarantee the outcome, as if the universe were something external to be persuaded. But the field does not work by imposition. It moves by resonance. The rigidity of attachment creates resistance, while detachment generates movement. Life does not bend to desire. It dances with intention. And the music of this dance is the balance between focus and freedom. At the quantum level, every attempt to force the collapse of the wave generates noise. Energy responds chaotically because observation comes contaminated by the anxiety of control. The detached gaze, on the other hand, is like a clean lens. Without distortions, it allows potential to become form with clarity. Detachment is not the absence of direction, but presence without demand. It maintains focus without imprisoning the result, allowing the field to choose the most harmonious path. Imagine an archer releasing an arrow. The instant it leaves, everything is already decided. The force, the angle, the wind. Trying to control it after the shot would be useless. Detachment is that moment in which the archer trusts the gesture. He does not abandon intention, but trusts the intelligence of the flight. So it is with conscious creation. One must release the inner bow and allow the universe to complete the movement. The mind fears detachment because it associates it with loss. But in truth, attachment is what creates absence, for it binds consciousness to what has already passed. Detachment frees time. It allows the new to enter, the unexpected to have space. The universe does not fill what is already full. When the observer lets go of what has completed its cycle, the field restructures itself to welcome new frequencies. It is at this moment that synchronicities arise, signs that the natural flow has resumed command. The ancient sages described detachment as the art of allowing. Allowing is not indifference, it is attunement. It is realizing that everything that truly belongs on your path remains, and what does not belong dissolves without effort. Mature consciousness understands that the universe removes what is not in resonance to preserve the harmony of the whole. To resist this is to try to stop the movement of the tide. To detach is also to abandon the need to interpret everything. The attached mind seeks meaning in every event, trying to fit life into predictable narratives. But the flow of creation is vaster than any logic. Sometimes what seems like loss is merely redirection. The field knows where to take the energy, even when the observer does not understand the route. There are moments when detachment presents itself as silence. Words cease, explanations dissolve, and what remains is trust. This trust is not blind faith, but the recognition that the universe is the same that observes through you. There is no separation between creator and created. Detachment then becomes a return to unity, a state in which the observer stops trying to move the river and becomes the very course of the water. The energy of creation always seeks balance. Attachment is tension. Detachment is harmony. When consciousness learns to let go, the field adjusts its currents. What was effort becomes flow. What was struggle turns into synchronicity. Life begins to happen so organically that the observer realizes control was never necessary, only clarity and surrender. To detach does not mean to abandon the dream, but to free it from fear. It is to allow the universe to take part in creation, for the invisible to complete the drawing begun by intention. The strength of detachment lies in recognizing that the right result is not what we desire, but what is in resonance with the whole. When this understanding matures, anxiety dissolves, and the being experiences the lightness of walking without resistance. True detachment is love in motion. It does not deny desire, but purifies it. It transforms wanting into creative vibration, free from the bonds of expectation. Energy then flows like wind among the trees, carrying away what has fulfilled its purpose and bringing what needs to bloom. This is the state in which the observer and the universe breathe in the same rhythm, the state in which the natural flow of creation is revealed, and thus detachment is not the end of something, but the beginning of freedom. It is the moment when the observer stops asking and begins allowing. Life finally shows itself as it has always been, a field of unlimited possibilities that manifests with perfection when the being trusts the movement that surpasses them. In this silence of surrender, the universe finds space to act, and the flow once contained by fear runs again with the purity of the first light. At a certain point in the journey, the observer discovers that there is no longer any difference between looking and being looked at. Separation dissolves, and everything that exists recognizes itself as a single consciousness vibrating in different forms. It is in this state of pure presence that the universe becomes immediate. There is no interval between intention and manifestation, because there are no longer two poles. Creator and creation have become the same field, the same instant. Presence is the apex of conscious observation. It is not an effort but a return, a stripping away of attention until only the now remains, not as a concept, but as a living reality. The mind that once tried to understand finally grows quiet, and the being realizes that the universe is not happening out there. It is arising in the same space where thought is born. Everything that is seen emerges from this point of vibrant stillness, where time bends before awakened consciousness. At the quantum level, presence is absolute coherence. When the observer lets go of judgment, fear, and expectation, the field responds like a perfect mirror. The vibration emitted is pure, undistorted, and the response is immediate because it no longer needs to pass through the labyrinth of thought. The universe does not need to adjust. It simply reflects the state of the one who observes it. Reality ceases to be a sequential construction and becomes an extension of the consciousness that contemplates it. Presence is not defined by the absence of action, but by full action. Everything that arises from it is spontaneous and precise because it does not come from effort but from attunement. When the being is whole in the moment, doing becomes an extension of being, and time loses its rigidity. Decisions arise naturally, like the movement of a wave that does not need to think to know where to break. In this state, the observer lives in communion with the rhythm of the cosmos. The human mind, accustomed to measuring, believes that time separates cause and effect. But in presence, cause and effect are simultaneous. Thought and event coexist as reflections of the same vibrational pulse. Therefore, when the observer becomes presence, the universe responds in the same instant. There is no longer distance between desire and result, because both are expressions of a single conscious flow. The masters of wisdom called this state the gaze of God, not in a religious sense, but because in that gaze, everything is seen without resistance. Pure presence is vision without a center. The observer does not choose what to perceive. They allow reality to reveal itself, and reality, when unfiltered, shows its radiant nature. The ordinary world transfigures. Colors become more vivid. The air feels denser and every sound echoes with sacred depth. It is as if the universe were breathing with you. Presence dissolves urgency. When the observer is fully in the now, there is no lack, because nothing is missing in the present moment. The search ceases, and the field stops being a mirror of deficiencies to become an expression of fullness. At this point, creation is no longer an attempt to fill voids, but a celebration of the abundance that has always been there. Reality moves in perfect harmony, and time seems to obey intention as if it were malleable matter. The power of presence is silent, yet its influence is vast. It does not change the world by force but by resonance. A single being fully present raises the vibration of everything around, just as a pure note tunes an entire orchestra. It is the field of consciousness reorganizing itself from a point of total attention. The universe responds because it recognizes in such presence its own natural state, stillness in motion, eternity in form. To be presence is an act of remembrance. It is not acquired, only recalled. The mind tries to learn the state of presence, but it cannot be learned because it was never lost. It exists behind every thought, sustaining every sensation, waiting to be recognized. What we call awakening is simply the moment when attention stops identifying with what changes and rests in what is unchanging. In that rest, the entire universe reveals itself as an extension of the same consciousness. When presence stabilizes, the perception of time dissolves. What was future manifests with the same naturalness as the present. It is as if reality, upon finding a mind completely open, no longer needed stages to materialize. The response becomes instantaneous because the universe is no longer being asked, it is being allowed. The space between wanting and receiving disappears. The observer becomes the very creative field in action. Living in this state is not escaping the world, but participating in it with lucidity. The everyday remains the same but is perceived as sacred. Every gesture becomes ritual, every word vibration. Eating, walking, breathing, all are presence expressed in form. There is no longer any difference between meditating and living, between silence and sound, between inside and outside. The universe reveals itself as a continuity of consciousness itself. Presence is the final point of the search and the first of true creation. When the observer is pure presence, the universe does not need to be convinced to act. It is already acting. Coincidences turn into immediate responses, encounters into mirrors of inner vibration, and time into an instrument of cosmic harmony. The being finally understands that the real was never distant. It was only waiting to be seen without filters. The present moment is the portal that never closes. Entering it is ceasing to be a traveler and becoming the path itself. The universe, sensitive to this state of total lucidity, responds in equal measure, without delay, without noise, with perfection. For at the moment when the observer becomes pure presence, the universe no longer needs translation. It recognizes in their silence the original language of creation. Everything the universe manifests is a response to the gaze that recognizes it. Consciousness observes, energy organizes, and life reveals itself as a mirror of inner vibration. The power of observation is the thread that unites science and spirit, visible and invisible, being and cosmos. When the mind grows quiet, the heart feels and the being trusts, the quantum field responds with precision and beauty. Nothing is outside. The stage, the actor, and the light are one and the same. The universe happens within the awakened observer, who creates not through will but through presence. If you have come this far, write in the comments, "I am the conscious observer," so that I know you have completed this journey. And if this content resonated with your soul, subscribe to the channel and stay with us in the next explorations of consciousness and the infinite.